My best friend said my scars would ruin her wedding photos. My best friend uninvited me from her wedding photos because, as she put it, my face would ruin the aesthetic. I remember just staring at her, trying to process the words. We were sitting in a cute little cafe, the kind she loved, with pastel macarons in a glass case and the smell of expensive coffee in the air. When I asked her why, my voice barely a whisper, she had the audacity to roll her eyes. "You're scarring," she said, fluffing her perfect pixie cut. "It might just draw attention, you know?" I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. The only reason I had these scars, the jagged, puckered line along my jaw and the missing piece of my ear, was because I took a bullet to the face for her. A bullet that was meant for her. She had named her first baby after me, a grand gesture that made all her friends coo about how loyal and grateful she was. But she wouldn't let me, the real, living, scarred me, be in her wedding photos because I ruined the pastel aesthetic she had so carefully curated on her Pinterest board. It all happened 2 years before, at a music festival. It was the kind of hot, sticky summer day that feels full of endless possibility. We had been inseparable since kindergarten, and this was our annual tradition. The music was thrumming through the ground, the crowd was a pulsing sea of people, and we were dancing, laughing, feeling completely invincible. I still hear the shots sometimes, usually when I'm in that weird space between being awake and being asleep. It's not like in the movies. It's a flat, popping sound. Pop, pop, pop. At first, you think it's fireworks or part of the show. Then the screaming starts. Not a uniform sound, but 1,000 individual shrieks of terror, a wave of panic that washed over the crowd. I remember Claire's hand gripping mine, her nails digging into my skin so hard I thought the bones might snap. My first instinct, my only instinct, was her. The noise was coming from our right, and without a single conscious thought, I turned toward it and tried to shield her with my own body, pushing her behind me. Everything after that is a blur of pain and noise. I felt a searing heat in my shoulder, a force that spun me around. Then came another impact, a horrifying crunching sound by my ear as another bullet grazed the side of my face. The world went sideways, and I remember the smell of dirt and spilled beer as I hit the ground. Later, in the stark, sterile-smelling hospital, the doctor would tell me how lucky I was. "A fraction of an inch to the left," he'd said, pointing at a chart, "and it would have severed your carotid artery." As it was, the bullet had just taken off a part of my ear and shattered the bone in my jaw. Lucky. In those first few days at the hospital, Claire was the perfect best friend. She cried, she held my hand, she told every nurse who would listen that I was her hero, her guardian angel. She called my mom constantly, giving her updates in a hushed, tearful voice. She sat with me for hours while I drifted in and out of a morphine haze. She was my rock. And then it was like a switch flipped. Her visits, once stretching for entire afternoons, became shorter. An hour. Then 20 minutes. Then she started texting excuses. "So sorry, something came up at work. Feeling really emotionally drained today. Need some me time." Then she just stopped showing up. The text stopped, too. The silence was louder than the gunshots had been. That's when I truly spiraled. The physical pain was one thing, a constant, throbbing reminder. But the pain of being abandoned by the person I had tried to save, that was a different universe of hurt. I couldn't sleep without a cocktail of meds that left me feeling groggy and disconnected. My face was a lopsided, swollen mess. I'd catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror and not recognize the person staring back. Panic attacks would seize me in the shower, my heart hammering against my ribs, the sound of the water suddenly turning into screams. People stared at me in the pharmacy line, their eyes lingering on my scars with a morbid curiosity that made my skin crawl. My body felt wrong, alien. My voice sounded different, raspy from the damage. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Meanwhile, on social media, Claire was a blooming rose. She got that chic pixie cut, started volunteering at a local animal shelter, and posted long, eloquent captions about survivor strength and the power of healing. She became a minor local celebrity, the beautiful girl who had miraculously escaped the festival shooting unscathed. When people in the comments would ask if she knew me, the girl in the news reports who'd been critically injured, she would reply with performative grace. "I owe her my life," she'd write, followed by a prayer hands emoji. "She is the bravest person I know." But when I would text her a simple, "Hey, feel up for a movie night?" my treat, she'd reply hours later saying she was healing differently and needed to maintain emotional boundaries. Apparently, my lopsided, scarred face was a violation of those boundaries. 2 years passed. 2 years of grueling physical therapy, of learning to live with the constant ringing in my damaged ear, of forcing myself to go outside even when the fear was paralyzing. Then came the engagement announcement. Claire was getting married to a handsome, wealthy guy named Roger. The wedding was set to be a pastel, beachside affair in early summer, perfect for her carefully curated Instagram feed. I was surprised when she called to ask if I would do a reading during the ceremony. A small, foolish part of me hoped it was an olive branch, a sign that she wanted to mend the gaping chasm between us. I said yes, my voice catching with an emotion I couldn't quite name. The real message, the one that truly mattered, came a week later. It was a text, of course. She said her wedding planner, a very high-end one, had recommended the bridal party look visually cohesive. She said that my scarring, while a testament to my bravery, might draw attention and disrupt the overall aesthetic of the photographs. The aesthetic. My sacrifice, my pain, my altered face, all reduced to an inconvenient element that clashed with her color palette. She suggested that maybe I could still come as a guest, but it would be better if I didn't sit in the front rows or appear in too many of the professional photos. I told her I understood. I didn't. I wanted to scream, to rage, to throw my phone against the wall. But I was so tired. So I just typed, "I understand," and let the betrayal settle into the hollow space in my chest. A few days before the wedding, she posted a gushing tribute to me on all her social media platforms. It was a photo of us from before the shooting, two smiling, carefree girls. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. She called me her guardian angel, her hero. She wrote that I tragically couldn't make it to the wedding because, as a survivor, large events could be emotionally overwhelming for me. She was painting herself as the compassionate friend, protecting my fragile psyche, while simultaneously ensuring I wouldn't be there to mar her perfect pictures. The post got hundreds of likes and comments praising her for being so thoughtful. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurring through a haze of tears. Then I closed the app. The day before her wedding, I did something I never thought I'd do. I sat down in front of a window in my apartment, the gray light of the afternoon falling on my face, and I recorded a video on my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just spoke. I said everything I needed to say, quietly and calmly. I said I was so happy she had survived and that she was getting her perfect day. I said that sometimes I wished I hadn't survived, that I wished the bullet had hit me differently so I wouldn't have to live with the aftermath. I said that I still woke up, sometimes reaching for her hand in a panicked crowd that only existed in my head. It was raw, and it was honest, and it was everything I had kept locked inside for 2 years. I sent it to her sister, Megan, with a simple message. I thought you should see this. I didn't expect her to watch it, let alone do anything about it. I just needed one person in Claire's world to know the truth. As it turns out, Megan was more like me than I thought. She included my video in the reception slideshow. I found this out later from a mutual friend who was there. They were playing a loop of happy photos, the bachelorette trip to Napa, the bridal shower, Claire and Roger looking disgustingly in love, when the screen suddenly cut to me, sitting in silence in my apartment. Then, my voice filled the elegantly decorated ballroom. The friend said you could have heard a pin drop. Claire's face, which had been beaming, turned ashen. She stormed out of the reception, Roger trailing after her, looking utterly bewildered. Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was Claire. I can't believe you would try to make my wedding about you. That was it.
No apology, no remorse.
Just rage that her perfect day had been tarnished by a sliver of the ugly truth. I didn't reply. What was there to say? A month later, another message. A picture of an ultrasound. She was pregnant again. I want to name her after you, she wrote. My way of honoring what we went through together. The audacity was breathtaking. I told her to never contact me again. I couldn't help but think, with a grim sense of satisfaction, that one day that little girl might grow up and ask where her name came from. And Claire would either have to tell her the truth or invent another lie. Either way, she would have to remember me. I thought that would be the end of it. I was ready to close the chapter on Claire forever. But her world wasn't done with me yet. One gray Tuesday morning a few months later, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My physical therapy was on Thursdays, and my groceries had been delivered the day before. I peered through the peephole and saw a man in an expensive-looking navy blue suit. He had dark hair and tired eyes, and there was something about the anxious way he kept checking his phone that seemed familiar. I recognized him from the wedding photos Claire had plastered all over social media. It was her husband, Roger. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home. The last thing on earth I wanted was to be dragged back into Claire's vortex of drama. But a morbid curiosity, the same curiosity that makes you slow down to look at a car crash, won out. I opened the door, leaving the chain on. He looked deeply uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a schoolboy outside the principal's office. I need to talk to you about Claire, he said, his voice cracking on her name. It's important. There was a desperation in his eyes that I recognized. It was the same lost, unmoored look I'd had in the mirror for months after the shooting. Against my better judgment, I undid the chain and let him in. We sat at my small kitchen table, The one where I'd eaten countless solitary meals and sorted through mountains of medical bills. He couldn't stop staring at my scars. His eyes would flick to my jaw, my ear, the puckered skin on my shoulder. Then he'd catch himself and look away, suddenly fascinated by the salt shaker. I poured him a coffee, black. He seemed like that type. He wrapped his hands around the mug, as if it were a lifeline. He told me Claire had been acting strange since the wedding. She was having nightmares, waking up screaming my name. He wanted to know what had really happened between us. Ask your wife, I said, my voice flat. I have, he said, his voice laced with frustration. Multiple times. She just cries and tells me you're obsessed with her. That you've been stalking her since the shooting, that you couldn't accept that she'd moved on. She told me you tried to ruin our wedding out of pure jealousy because you're bitter about your injuries. I laughed. A harsh, ugly sound that made him flinch. Without another word, I went to my bedroom and grabbed my phone. I had a folder in my photo gallery labeled, simply, evidence. It was all there. Every manipulative text, every contradictory social media post. I had screenshots of the messages where she uninvited me from the photos, blaming the planner's advice on aesthetics. The ones where she lied to mutual friends about why I wasn't coming, spinning some sob story about my emotional fragility. The glowing tribute post she'd made. Farming for sympathy, while privately telling me to stay away. I handed him the phone. He scrolled through it in dead silence, his face growing paler with each image. When he got to the text about visual cohesion, he put the phone down on the table and rubbed his eyes, a long, weary gesture. Is there more? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. With Claire, I said, there's always more. I told him everything. I told him about the hospital, how she'd called me her hero one minute and disappeared the next. I told him how she'd used my story for sympathy at fundraisers and parties while ignoring my calls for months. I told him about her posts on survivor's guilt, while I was the one actually learning how to sleep through the night without waking up screaming. He looked stunned. He said she'd told him I was the one who pushed her away, that I had become too damaged and angry to maintain our friendship. She had twisted the narrative so completely that she was the victim of my trauma. I showed him the older messages. The ones where I begged her to just come over for an hour, where I told her I was scared of loud noises and couldn't be in crowds, where she replied that she needed space to process her own trauma. Meanwhile, her Instagram stories were filled with selfies at brunch with other friends, at concerts, at all the places we used to go together. Roger's hands were shaking now, and a little bit of coffee sloshed over the rim of his mug. He asked why I'd sent the video to her sister. I told him the truth. I just wanted one person to know I wasn't crazy. I never imagined Megan would play it at the reception. He told me Claire had convinced everyone it was a calculated attack, that I had manipulated her impressionable sister to destroy her happiness. Finally, he told me why he was really there. Claire was pregnant again, for months along, and she was insistent, almost manic, that if it was a girl, they had to name her after me. My full name. He tried to talk her out of it, said it felt wrong and macabre after everything that had happened, but she'd framed it as the ultimate act of honor, a way to make amends, without ever having to actually face me or apologize. The room started to feel small, the air thick and hard to breathe. He asked if I had anything else, anything that might help him understand the woman he'd married. I did. I had years of it. I showed him the slow, painful dissolution of our friendship through text messages. The shift from, I love you, you're my sister, to I need space, to nothing at all. I showed him a message from 3 months after the shooting, when I was still in intense physical therapy, barely able to walk. She had written a long paragraph about how hard it was for her to see me in pain, how it triggered her own trauma, and that she needed to prioritize her own healing. That same weekend, her Instagram showed her at another music festival, at the exact same venue, where we had almost died. Roger put my phone down. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last hour. What do you want? He asked. What would make any of this right? Nothing, I said, and the honesty of it settled in my bones. Nothing can make it right. The scars are permanent. The hearing loss in my left ear is permanent. The way I flinch when a car backfires is probably permanent, too. But I don't want your wife using my name. I don't want some innocent little girl carrying the weight of that lie. He nodded slowly. He said he would talk to her, that he would try to make her understand. He left, and I watched from my window as he sat in his car for a long, long time before finally driving away. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from a lawyer. Claire was filing for a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing her family and that Roger's visit had left her feeling traumatized and unsafe. Of course. She'd found her new story, and I was, once again, the villain. I immediately called a lawyer my parents had found for me, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Andrea. She listened to the whole story, looked at my folder of evidence, and laughed. This is flimsy at best, she said. She has no evidence of harassment. You have one text telling her not to contact you. Don't worry. These things usually fall apart when they're based on nothing but air. But Claire wasn't one to give up. A few days later, my neighbor, Janet from 4B, knocked on my door. She was a nosy woman who usually only spoke to me to complain about delivery trucks. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder. She told me a woman with short blonde hair, Claire, had been canvassing the building, asking questions about me. She was pretending to be a concerned friend, telling my neighbors that I'd been through a serious trauma and she was worried about my mental state, subtly implying I might be unstable or even dangerous. She was poisoning the well, trying to build a narrative of my instability before the court date. My hands were shaking as I closed the door. This was a level of vindictiveness I hadn't even imagined. I called Andrea again, who told me to document everything to create a paper trail. I sent Janet a thank you email, just as she'd suggested. The next morning, Roger called from a blocked number. His voice was rough. He said he'd confronted Claire about the restraining order, and she'd admitted to some of it, but had spun it into another elaborate fiction. She claimed she was only trying to protect me from the media attention of the wedding, that the planner had been the bad guy. She even showed him fake text messages, supposedly from me, full of angry, threatening language. She's not as smart as she thinks she is, Roger said, his voice grim. The timestamps on the text she faked are from a week I was still in the ICU, unconscious most of the time. The lies were unraveling. Roger's family, who had seen my video at the wedding, were starting to ask questions. His sister had started digging through Claire's old social media posts and found countless inconsistencies. Her own bridesmaids were now comparing notes in a group chat, realizing Claire had told each of them a different story about why I wasn't in the wedding party. The carefully constructed facade was cracking under the pressure. Then Megan, Claire's sister, called me. She was crying. She said Claire had completely cut her off, blaming her for ruining her marriage. But Megan said she'd known something was wrong for years. She'd seen Claire's hypocrisy firsthand, watching her post about being a traumatized homebody while she was out partying. She told me she played the video because she thought Claire needed a reality check, a moment of truth. She hadn't anticipated the fallout, but she didn't regret it. Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. Claire had been telling people for over a year that I'd become a stalker, that I'd shown up at her work and her parents' house, and that she'd had to move to get away from me. It was a complete fabrication. I had medical records, physical therapy logs, receipts, a mountain of proof that I had been practically housebound during the time she claimed I was stalking her across the city. Andrea was thrilled. "This is great," she said. "She's lying in a legal document. This will not go well for her." A week before the hearing, things escalated. I came home from a physical therapy appointment to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart hammered in my chest. Nothing was stolen, but things had been moved. Papers on my desk were shuffled. My laptop was open. Someone had been inside my home. The feeling of violation was overwhelming. I filed a police report, but the security footage for that time period was, conveniently, corrupted. That night, I got a call at 3 a.m. from an unknown number. Just breathing at first, then a distorted whisper. "Stop talking to him." It was a clear threat. On Andrea's advice, I installed a security camera in my apartment and started recording all my calls. The day of the restraining order hearing was surreal. Claire showed up looking like the perfect victim in a soft pink dress, her face a mask of sorrowful bravery. But her case fell apart almost immediately. Andrea systematically dismantled every single lie. The faked text messages were disproven by my hospital records. Her stalking claims were obliterated by my physical therapy logs and alibis. When the judge asked Claire directly why she had excluded me from her wedding photos, she started to cry, saying it was complicated and she was just trying to protect me. When Andrea presented the screenshots of her texts about aesthetics and visual cohesion, Claire's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. There was no context that could make those words anything other than cruel. The judge denied the restraining order with a look of undisguised contempt for Claire. It should have been a victory, but I just felt numb. That night, the wedding video was leaked online by one of Roger's cousins. Not just my part, but the whole thing, Claire's meltdown, the confused guests, the aftermath. It went viral in our city. People started connecting the brave festival survivor with the bride having a tantrum. The comment section was a war zone. Her carefully crafted public image was shattered in a matter of hours. The final explosion came a few days later. Roger called me. He had left her. The night before, Claire had locked herself in their bedroom, screaming that I had ruined her life, that I should have just died at the concert. He had recorded all of it. He played me a snippet, and her voice, filled with a venom I had never heard before, was terrifying. He moved out while she was at her mother's, leaving only a note with his lawyer's contact info. An hour after she came home to an empty house, she went into early labor, induced by stress. Her mother had the gall to call me from the hospital, saying Claire was asking for me, that she was sorry. I didn't go. It was just another trap. The baby was a healthy girl. She named her Sophia. Not after me. Roger had won that one battle. He filed for divorce the following week, citing emotional abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documentation of her lies, even searches for how to hire a lockpick on her laptop that he'd found. The divorce was brutal, and in the end, Roger was granted primary custody. The judge cited Claire's pattern of deception and manipulation and ordered her to undergo therapy before she could have unsupervised visits. Life moved on. I started to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. I went back to therapy, joined a support group for trauma survivors, and started to tell my own story, in my own words. I met other people Claire had hurt over the years. A former coworker she'd accused of harassment to get a promotion. A college roommate she'd turned an entire friend group against over a bottle of shampoo. There were dozens of us, a strange, informal club of people who had been cast as villains in Claire's perpetual victim narrative. I ran into Roger at the grocery store about a year later. He had Sophia with him, strapped to his chest. She had Claire's eyes, but he looked peaceful, happy. He told me he'd remarried a teacher named Julie, who was kind and patient. They were building a real life, free from the chaos. He thanked me. He said if I hadn't shown him the truth, he might have been trapped in that web of lies forever. Claire's life, from what I heard, continued its downward spiral. She moved to another state to start fresh, but the internet has a long memory. The wedding video was always just a Google search away. She got a new boyfriend, a man named Bruce, and told him she was a widow, that Roger had died in a car crash. The lie fell apart when his ex-wife did a background check. He left her, but not before she got pregnant. The pattern repeated. Another baby, another custody battle she lost, another man who saw the monster behind the mask. I eventually met someone, too. His name is Jordan, and he's a physical therapist who knew nothing about my past. He saw me for me, not for my scars. He was patient and kind, and for the first time in years, I felt safe. We got married last year. A small, simple ceremony with 20 guests. My scars were visible in every single photo, and nobody cared. It was perfect. When we got back from our honeymoon, there was a letter waiting for me. It was from Claire. It was short. She said she'd heard I got married, and she was happy for me. She was sorry for everything. She hoped I could forgive her someday. I read it once, then I threw it in the trash. There was no anger, no pain, just nothing. Indifference. And it felt like freedom. The last I heard, Claire had moved again, to another state alone. She had lost custody of both children after a series of desperate, manipulative stunts, including showing up at my workplace with Sophia to try and force a confrontation. Roger and Bruce, the two fathers of her children, had bonded over their shared experience and presented a united front in court. Now, she's just a woman with a social media profile full of inspirational quotes about leaving toxicity behind, a ghost haunting the new life she's trying to build on the rubble of her old one. I'm pregnant now. A little girl. We're naming her Elena. A name with no history, no weight, no lies attached. Just a new beginning. Sometimes I think about the shooting and the choice I made. I don't regret saving Claire. Turning toward danger to protect someone I loved was a reflection of who I was. Her response, the years of cruelty and lies, was a reflection of who she was. The trauma didn't change us, it just revealed us. And while she is stuck in a loop, endlessly rewriting her own tragic story, I am finally free to write mine.